Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the deputy editor of ConservativeHome, Henry Hill, and the associate political editor of the new Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let us take a look at the front pages. The Guardian, to start with, leading on what it describes as the turmoil in South Korea after the president was forced to back down from his move to impose martial law after Parliament rejected it. Financial Times also leading on the extraordinary events in South Korea. The Sun has an exclusive, it says, on a MasterChef contestant, claiming Greg Wallace behaved inappropriately with her on camera and claims that it was edited out before going to air. The Telegraph reports that Whitehall staff have reverted to working from home while the private sector moves to get more people into the office. The Times says the number of people sent to prison is to be reduced as changes to sentencing are to be made. The government's row with farmers over inheritance tax is on the front of the Express as Kemi Badenoch calls on the Prime Minister to do the right thing and back our farmers. Full steam ahead, the Mirror speaks to the new Transport Secretary who promises that passengers will be put at the heart of British Railways. Daily Mail runs an exclusive on detectives interviewing Lucy Letby on more baby deaths. And the Metro leads on the news that the Princess of Wales joined other royals to greet the Emir of Qatar in her first state visit since her cancer treatment, or her appearance at the first state visit. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us, listen to our guests. So let's head to Henry and Rachel. And kicking off then with the extraordinary events in South Korea. Henry, why don't you pick this up? Martial law, which is then rescinded. I mean, what a state of affairs there.
Yeah, it looked very exciting for a few hours. Essentially, this used to be a very common in South Korea, which only became sort of a full parliamentary democracy in the 1980s. Previously, it was a series of sort of often military dictatorships or autocratic presidents. Essentially, the president has the power to declare martial law, but the South Korean parliament has the power to veto that. And what happened here is that the president declared it, the parliament sort of met and convened a special session to veto it, and then there was a very dicey couple of hours because the army indicated that it was going to continue upholding the martial law order if the president told it to, right? So that suggests that fundamentally the military position was that they were going to take the president's orders. Happily, the president has backed down, and so therefore, God knows what's going to happen now, but the crisis appears to have passed.
Yeah, and the happily was because parliamentarians seemed to scale various bits of building to get into the National Assembly to vote it out. I think 190 got in out of, what, about 300, 190 to nil, they voted against it. But who wants to go back to the 1980s is what people in South Korea will be thinking about this. And this is an absolutely critical Western ally with forces in there of the US, for example.
Yeah, it's not a country, South Korea, that we normally, at least recently, have thought about as being susceptible to military coups or political instability of this kind. There is an astonishing account in the Telegraph from a South Korean lawmaker talking. The headline is, "I broke into my own parliament to save South Korea from a coup." Talks about jumping the walls, managed to crawl through the legs of policemen, another one sort of wrestling with a police officer with a gun. Absolutely astonishing. And I think what this comes down to is when it really matters, who are the people who have power? It's the people with the guns, right? And so the question is, who are the people with the guns going to respond to? Is it the president? Is it the parliament that has just voted to contravene the president? And sort of as Henry says, after a couple of sort of dicey moments, now it looks like we've got stability for, at least for the moment. But there was a moment there where it really did all hang in the balance. And I think it's a reminder that what we think of as sort of democratic norms can be really sort of unstable or can hinge on very, very sort of small moments. And it reminded me, looking at the scenes that we've got up there, the army in the streets and protesters. In 2000, with the public uprising against Milosevic in Yugoslavia and people storming the streets and the army being ordered to fire on citizens and mid-ranking army officers deciding not to, which was sort of the beginning of the end. And I remember my father calling me and my sister in to watch that on TV and say, sort of, look, when instability like this happens, the controllers with the people who have the guns and who the people with the guns will listen to. So very dramatic scenes in South Korea tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really extraordinary. I mean, does it speak to an inexperienced president who won in 2022 on a way for the majority, lost an election, you know, he's under pressure and he's got it wrong. And what happens to him now? Well, presumably he's not going to stay in post, is he?
I mean, it's without, obviously, having not become an expert on South Korea in the few hours since this story broke, like, it is an absolutely baffling decision, right?
Yeah.
Because essentially what's happened is his party lost its parliamentary majority. He's obviously his president elected separately. And that means that his government not only can't legislate and is mired in a series of scandals, but the thing that I think really precipitated this crisis is that the opposition parties, which have a majority in the parliament, are about to pass a budget bill which will cut all of the government budgets. And he can't veto a budget bill, which means that you functionally don't really have a government in South Korea at the moment. The president can veto the bills of the parliamentary majority, but they can cut his budget and he can't veto that. Like, it is chaos. So, but it's hard to see where he saw this going, right? Because, you know, a coup, if you're going to try, not that he necessarily was, but you need to plan it really carefully, right? And then you need to have the will to see it through. And I think, again, touching on what we discussed earlier, the interesting thing here, the takeaway from this, is about military culture, right? Because what this suggests is that South Korean army is culturally still up for overthrowing the democratic government if it's told to by the president, right? That suggests that the acculturation of the officer class in the Korean military has not changed since the 1980s.
See, that's interesting. Everyone else says this is actually a success for democracy. You're saying this is of great concern.
The president backed down. He didn't have the support of his own party. You know, there are a lot of moving parts you need to do to overthrow a relatively mature democracy, and he didn't have them. But I do think it's crucial to bear in mind that the military did not refuse. When the National Assembly said we're vetoing martial law, the generals said, we're going to keep martial law up until the president decides that it's going to stop, and then he folded. That is an important thing to take away.
In a year of elections, we've got some really wobbly governments around, haven't we? And I'd probably include France in that right now, or even Germany from earlier.
Well, you famously got ex-French generals writing to the national newspaper saying they need a military coup last year. That happened, so...
Yeah. I was just talking about Michel Barnier a little bit more simply, actually. But we'll watch that story later in the week, I think, won't we? In the meantime, let's move on to domestic matters, shall we? Front page of the Daily Mirror. Labour reveals its timetable for renationalisation as the first firm is named, which is a big commuter belt one, isn't it? Interesting. We're talking about railways here.
This is South Western, which is going to be the first railway to be taken into public ownership. Pretty busy week for the new Transport Secretary, who only took over on Friday?
Yeah,
Saturday?
Friday, yeah.
So I think it's days into the job. This is Heidi Alexander. Rail nationalisation is one of those really interesting things because it polls really well. People support it because I think they think that the current system, which is very, very high fares that just keep going up, overcrowded trains that always seem to be late or cancelled, they think that the current system isn't working for them. The train operating companies argue that they are doing the best they can to try and keep the railways running when they've got dodgy equipment, and they argue that Network Rail, which
staff
is
shortages,
staff shortages. They argue that the infrastructure hasn't been maintained. There hasn't been enough investment. So everyone's kind of blaming each other. But basically, the public support this because they think it will make rail experience better for travellers. And the Transport Secretary has said that this is about putting passengers at the heart of our rail system, which is something that I think a lot of passengers will be absolutely delighted by. The question is, when it actually comes to it, and it's the government that's having to invest, having to put the money in rather than the companies, will they make that investment? Will things get better? We don't know. But it's in Labour's manifesto, this idea that when the contracts run out, they'll automatically be taken over by the state. So South Western is going to be the first one. Yeah,
it feels like a cheap solution, doesn't it? I mean, I'm looking at you wondering if you're too young to remember British Rail. I don't know, actually. But the good news is we'll be able to blame the government soon, won't we? So there we are.
I mean, yeah, we can blame the government anyway. I mean, the main thing to understand about rail privatisation in this country is that it's mostly fake. We never privatised the railways. What we did was we sold passenger franchises, right? So basically, we sell these companies the right to stick their name on the side of the trains for 5 years. Network Rail owns all the track and the rolling stock. You have to apply to the Department of Transport if you want to make any changes to your timetable. None of the freight revenue cross-subsidises passenger rail, which it would on a proper line. So the challenge, as Rachel alluded to with this, is the only thing that happens by default if you stop selling the rail passenger franchises is that you lose the money the franchisees brought in. Right? That's it. And then the Treasury, which has this black hole of variable size that it keeps having to deal with, In order for the railways to stand still, the Treasury is going to have to find all the money the franchisees put in. Then, if it wants to improve services, it then has to find even more money. Now, most of the rail passenger franchises are not particularly good, but the one that is going to be, I think, a pain to lose is going to be not South Western, but Chiltern, because it was given a completely different franchise. It was given 25 years renewal conditional on investment, all of which it made. And I think the challenge for Labour is going to be simply, there is nothing about nationalisation that changes anything. Right?
Apart from you lose the income.
Apart from you lose the income, because the DfT already sets the timetable. The companies don't own the trains. They control very little about how the railway works.
Labour would say that the profit from tickets then go back into the railway. So
yes.
that is the counter-argument. The question is whether passenger ticket revenue is enough to make the necessary investment.
I suspect that when the government is politically directly on the hook for ticket prices, the odds of ticket prices being set at a rate which brings in enough revenue to offset the franchise sales is remote, because we'll see exactly what's happened with TfL in London, which is owned by the mayor. He holds the prices down. There's no investment.
Right. I want to squeeze in another nationalisation type story, which is front of the Guardian, another newspaper as well. British Steel could be returned to state control. Ministers are considering renationalising British Steel in a last-ditch attempt to save thousands of jobs amid a standoff between the government and the company's Chinese owners over a £1 billion investment. We have a statement from the government tonight, but anyway, what is the suggestion in this story before I come to that?
Well, this is basically a row between the British government and the Chinese company over these jobs and the future of British Steel as a company. But it's also, I think, sort of really symbolic. Nationalisation is sort of back in fashion, or at least back in sort of public sentiment, possibly because, Henry might argue, people don't know what it means as the reality of it, possibly because there's a sense that the current system, isn't working and companies have taken over.
Or the nation loses control of infrastructure and stuff.
The nation has lost control of sort of key industries that are really critical to national economic stability. And so you've got a sort of return, a sort of undoing of some of the core Thatcherite policies that have sort of shaped our economy since then.
And I don't want to put a downer on doing the story, but anyway, the statement tonight from the government or the Department of Business: we have no plans to nationalise British Steel. We're working across government in partnership with trade unions and businesses to secure a green steel transition that's right for the workforce, represents a good investment for taxpayers and safeguards the future of the steel industry in Britain.
That was a pointless 2 minutes that we spent discussing it then.
I enjoyed it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But, I mean, do you need to go?
We'll wait and see what happens. Let's do ... with that story, shall we? Lots more still to come. We will be discussing the closure of nuclear power stations across the UK. I feel a theme here, don't you? As reported on the front of the Telegraph. Back in a moment.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power.
No freedom!
Sky News, the full story first. There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News. The full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. With me once again, the Deputy Editor of ConservativeHome, Henry Hill, and the New Statesman's Associate Political Editor, Rachel Cunliffe. Welcome back to both of you. To the Daily Express. It feels like two campaigns, actually, for them. One is Esther Ranson. The other one is farmers. Do the right thing and back our farmers. Kemi Badenoch forcing a Commons vote to try and save family farms. The Tories are urging, the paper tells us, Rachel.
I'm loving Kemi Badenoch's seamless transition into, Barber jacket, welly boots, really rural, cares about rural issues. Because the Conservatives have realised that the inheritance tax changes on farms, despite the fact that they don't affect the vast majority of people. I mean, inheritance tax doesn't affect the vast majority, I think 96% of people, and farming is a subsection of that.
Comes up top in most hated taxes, mind you,
because it's really unpopular. And farmers, because we have a very romanticised idea of what the farming industry does for our country, they've been managing to get a huge amount of public support for the change of the tax that will see them pay half the normal rate of inheritance tax that anyone else pays. And she's capitalising on that. And it's kind of the Tory strategy in opposition so far has basically been whatever Labour's doing, shout about it, which...
That is just opposition.
I don't think it is opposition. I think at some point in opposition, you have to say what you do instead, and she hasn't.
Probably not like 6 months in, I guess. We'd be defending Kemi, but,
Yeah.
I think fundamentally this isn't going to change anything in the short term because Labour has a massive parliamentary majority. It will do two things. One, it will make Labour MPs vote. And if they vote with the government, that gives you something to put on your leaflets for the next 4 years. But two, and I think this is what's really crucial when it comes to the inheritance tax thing, it will mean that there will be a clip of Kemi in the 2026 season of Clarkson's Farm, which is when this is going to get destroyed. Because fundamentally, he makes one of the most popular shows in the country with one of the most talented TV production camera crews in the country. This is going to be in it. We know it's going to be in it. He's had his camera crews at his events. Probably not next year because of the delay, but in 2026, there is going to be 8 episodes of prime television in which he is going to present farmers' stories.
This is long-term strategic political
he will
thinking,
cut, because he'll do a picture of him at the rally. He'll then cut to a picture of the Prime Minister meeting BlackRock, which was just an extraordinarily bad decision, and then it'll be Kemi Badenoch denouncing it here.
OK, I think I've run out of time now, have I? I think so. I was just going to do very quickly the porridge ban, unhealthy versions of breakfast cereals, including muesli, porridge oats and granola, will be included in next year's ban on junk food advertising.
Yeah, no
Loads of
sugary
other things to
cereal.
talk about. Yeah, exactly. Loads of other things to talk about, but we'll see you again soon. Thank you both very much indeed. See you for the 11th. Here is the weather. Tomorrow looks fine for many, but western parts will turn wet and windy, leading to an unsettled, if mild, few days. So mostly dry and cold start to the day, patchy frost, some fog, icy stretches, especially across Scotland. Travel disruption possible there. Britain will have some morning sunshine once fog lifts, but cloud over Wales and central England will take some time to break. Few showers are possible there too. Meanwhile, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see increasing cloud, rain reaching the far west by lunchtime, mild in the windy west, rather chilly again elsewhere. Well, coming up next, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. We will have the very latest from South Korea, a day of turmoil where the president said he would lift martial law that he imposed earlier following clashes between protesters and the military. Update to come.